You guys hungry too? All right, what's up guys? So a little story time. Just finished putting some more food in for Bernard, obviously. Got a little bit of an audience here. So for those of you that follow the channel, the few of you that follow this channel, you probably noticed that Betty, our other Great Bernard, is not around. And so that's what this story is about. It's an unfortunate story. It's something that I've kind of waited to share just because, you know, we were kind of upset about the whole situation. But long story short, we no longer have Betty. It's not because we lost her because she ran away. It's simply because she unfortunately got hit by a car. It was something that we were afraid was inevitable because of them getting out from our property. The backstory here for those that don't follow the channel, our Great Pyrenees have always roamed our property. We have about 8-ish, 9-ish acres, and they've always been free-ranging our property. Never really had any problems with them leaving our property. They were trained with an e-collar. About a year or so ago, we started having problems where they were running off, chasing coyotes. They always run off, they always came back. And so ever since that started, I went through the process of retraining them. The collar company that we use, they sent me an upgraded collar, something that was supposed to be a little bit more appropriate for stubborn dogs like Great Pyrenees, and even that didn't work. We tried reward systems. We spent a whole lot more time with the dogs. I spent a whole lot more time with the dogs. These cows were a result of us getting a livestock to give Betty and Bernard a job to do, hoping that that would deter them from wanting to run off after the coyotes and instead stick around to defend the property. Well, if you know Great Pyrenees, you know that they tend to cover a large area, and considering we only have 8-9 acres, we are surrounded by open farmland, some developments around us, and there is a highway about a half mile west of us. So once again, you know, since they've gotten a taste of all the land that's around, they have a tendency to think that that's all their land to protect. So inevitably what happened was we kept them contained in the back area of our property, which meant they no longer had free range to our entire property, which meant that they no longer could protect our chickens that are also free ranging our property. And so that worked. They were contained in the back area of our property, which has essentially 3 layers of border. It's got this physical steel pipe fence. It's got a hot wire fence that keeps the cattle in. And the dogs, at the time when we first put them in, they tested it and they knew that that hot wire fence was not something to mess with. And then they still had their e-collar boundary that I put around the perimeter. So essentially 3 boundaries that kept them finally contained in the back area of our property. This is the back area of our property. So we had no issues with them running off. Well, unfortunately, once again, about a month and a half, 2 months ago, just down there, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a cattle gate that was chained up with a fence, and for whatever reason, in the middle of the night, the wind swung that gate open, and in the morning we noticed that Bernard was out. Of course, inevitably, Betty would be right behind him, and normally when they're off, when they run away, they come back, they're together. We had noticed that Bernard was by himself. Betty was not. Well, that morning we were just kind of following routine. My wife and I went to go drop our daughter off at daycare. Came back on the side of the highway, not on the highway, but on the side of the highway. I saw something kind of white and fluffy. Didn't think much of it. It did cross my mind at the moment. I remember thinking that, was that Betty? And then we came home. I was like, no way, that's Betty. So we came home, looked for her, thought maybe she was hanging out in the cow barn over there, which is where she normally hangs out. But when we came home, we called for her, we checked, and that's essentially when our hearts kind of sank. Jumping back in my truck, and sure enough, that white fluffy thing on the side of the road was Betty. And so that was that. I recovered her body, brought her back home, so she is resting with us underneath that tree right there. And that is essentially why you no longer see Betty with us. So once again, it's been about, I'd say, closer to 2 months now. Like I said, I've kind of held off on sharing the story. I know a lot of folks are probably going to be upset. A lot of folks tend to get ticked off no matter what you say, no matter what the full story is. You know, if I did absolutely nothing to try to prevent our dogs from running off, if I just didn't give a hoot about their safety, you know, go ahead and you know, come at me all you want. That's fair, but the reality is I feel like I did anything and everything to keep our dogs safe and keep them at home, and I did. It was simply that fluke accident of that gate popping open in the middle of the night. And normally they only run off when they see coyotes or hear coyotes. For the most part, they can be out free range actually all night, and they'll still hang around if there's no hints of coyote presence. But unfortunately that night the gate swung open, and they probably got a hint of some coyote presence. And like I said, we're only on a few acres, but to them, they own several hundred acres, you know, so it's their job to protect. They're only doing their job. But unfortunately, with that highway being just a bit too close to us, that ended up in an unfortunate way for us. So that's the story behind why Betty is no longer with us. We still have, of course, Bernard. He's still doing his job. As you can see, he just ran off there. Towards evening hours, what he does is he just circles the perimeter of our property there. And this is the back, once again, the back area of our property. He does the same thing. Even on the front area of our property, which is not fenced, he does that also. If there's no coyote presence, all he does is he just kind of runs along the border of where he's been trained. And he's been trained ever since he was a puppy. And for whatever reason, maybe it was when they finally matured, but it was when the coyotes began to taunt them. And by that I mean the coyotes knew where Betty and Bernard would not cross. They knew the boundaries, and they would literally just be running right alongside our boundary, our perimeter. I think Betty and Bernard just got fed up with that, and that's when they eventually just started darting off. Even with the collar shock, even with them being retrained, even with them being rewarded to stay, even calling them, using a bell system, everything. It's, you know, it's in their blood, it's in their DNA to go after predators and keep the place safe, and they do a hell of a job at it. But unfortunately, that also means they disregard any sort of boundary that you have. I know a lot of folks will say, oh, well, my Great Pyrenees don't run off, they stay on our property. Well, I'm good for you. You know, I mean, we've attempted that, and like I said, our dogs for the most part stay on our property as well. But you know, when they have a job to do, they're going to do their job. So that's that. I'm going to stop rambling. But rest in peace, Betty. And there, for those of you that have followed the channel, for our Great Pyrenees, unfortunately, we do just have our Bernard now, and he's still a hell of a dog, so I'm glad we still have him around. But we do miss Betty. So that's that. It's dinner time. Been outside all day, so I'm going to go in and get dinner ready. Thanks for watching, guys. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please be sure to subscribe. I know I'm just falling behind on these videos. I say that every time, but yeah, if you have any comments, any questions, feel free to leave them below. But until next time, thanks for watching.